Hello everyone, Aidan the Hostile here again. I'm here to answer another question, another wonderful question. This one was asked by Ali Y, and they ask, what was the Viking clothing and jewelry like? Well, again, another great question. So I'm going to break it down in a couple parts. The first part, we're going to talk about women's clothing. First of all, clothing was typically made of only a few fabrics. Typically linen and wool were the two most popular fabrics. Occasionally you would see silk, but those were imported, therefore costing a lot more money, and would have only been worn by very wealthy women. But we're going to talk about the dresses and whatnot here in a sec. So linen is a natural fiber made from the flax plant, and was made and worn by a lot of people around Europe and Northern Europe. The Vikings would wear, women specifically, would wear the linen underdress as the first layer. And then over top of that, maybe a heavier linen dress or a woolen dress. Because in Scandinavia, it got very cold, so you would have to layer to stay warm. So the women would have a linen underdress, a woolen outer dress, and then if they were outside for some reason, a cloak or a fur or mittens and hats and things like that, typically all made of wool. Wool is great because it breathes, and it also helps wick away moisture if you happen to sweat, and it also helps shed water off of it because of the lanolin that's still in the woolen fibers. But moving on, they would typically also wear what was referred to as an apron dress. And this was typically used whenever they were working, if they were doing chores around the house or cooking or things like that. And it basically was more of a tubular style dress that they would put on, and it would have two straps that would come up over their shoulders and was typically pinned with brooches. And we call these brooches turtle brooches because they're shaped somewhat like a turtle shell. These were typically made of metal, sometimes bronze. If they were wealthy, they would be made out of silver or other precious metals. But sometimes also they were made of things like horn, and they would have been carved, or they would have been gilded in some way, and they were very seldom plain. They were very, to use a word, gaudy. They were very extravagant looking. I have an example here. Now these are made of horn, and they have been carved, and as you can see, they are oval. They're either oval or circular in nature most of the time, and I don't know if you can see this, they are dished or shaped almost like a turtle shell, and they would go up here and be fastened to help hold the straps to the dress. Now typically they would have beads strung in between the two shells or the two brooches, and they would also carry, if they had keys or if they had a grooming kit or a small knife or things like that, hanging from these brooches as well. I don't think I need to tell you, but I will, that Viking clothing didn't have pockets. Pockets were not invented yet, at least for the Vikings. So everything that a typical person would carry would have to be suspended or hung, or from a belt or in some other fashion, in order to be carried around conveniently. The belts that women would wear were typically tablet woven, made of wool or fabric, and they would wear those around their waist, and also possibly a bag of some sort, a small bag to carry small things if they were out in a shop or moving around or whatever, and not at home. At home they probably weren't carrying valuables or things like that with them at all times. They would have utilitarian things with them, but other than that, pretty much not. Typically, women would also wear woolen socks and leather shoes. That is the basic outfit that a Viking Age woman would wear. There are some differences based on where in Scandinavia you were from and what time frame you were from, because the Viking Age, as we typically consider it, is from the raid at Lindisfarne to the Battle of Hastings. So anytime in that time frame, clothing would change. Our clothing today doesn't stay in fashion very long. Their clothing would have been a lot longer period of time, but clothing did vary over the time between those two areas in the Viking Age, and it would also vary, like I said before, from the different areas that they lived. Men's clothing. I have a little bit more knowledge in this department, but basically it was very similar to the women's clothing. Men would wear a linen undertunic, like I have right here, and then typically a woolen or a heavier linen overtunic, like I have here. Like women's clothing, the styles differed based on time frame and the location of where they lived. Most of it was all about the same, but there were some regional differences. Length of tunics were different as well as the cut of the tunic. This tunic that I'm wearing right here is typically referred to as a Thorsberg tunic. We know this because of grave finds and the stuff that was found in the grave was broken down and measured, and patterns were available online and various other places to recreate these tunics. So this would have been considered a Thorsberg tunic. Viking pants were typically made of linen as well. Every now and then you would see a more heavier wool, depending on if they were outside, if it was winter. Once again, layering is very important whenever you're dealing with the really cold climates of Scandinavia. Men would also wear leather shoes or leather boots, and sometimes they would even wrap their legs with strips of wool called winagas, and that protected their legs and shins, almost like a set of socks that you wear outside of your clothing. But that was the basic men's outfit. Now, men would also wear jewelry as well as women would, and I mentioned the beads with the women's clothing a little bit ago. I have right here one of my treasure necklaces, as it's referred to. This right here is a necklace comprised of various lampwork beads that I have collected over the years, and I've strung them together as a necklace to wear. And these beads would have been created all over Scandinavia, and they would have been traded and sold, and actually some of these beads are even from areas south of Scandinavia where any Viking raider would have been able to find or pick up, or even in marketplaces like Birka would be able to purchase from other areas. Men would also wear, and women for that matter, would also wear a lot of amber. Amber is very prevalent in Viking Age Scandinavia, and it is made from fossilized tree sap. That was fashioned into all kinds of jewelry and things like that as well. Some more jewelry that was worn. There were metal bracelets. This is a silver bracelet with a Viking dragon motif. And then I have a bronze bracelet with the same dragon motif. Sometimes men would also adorn themselves with beads in their beard and beads in their hair, things like that. The Vikings in general were very showy. They liked to wear their wealth. They liked bright colors. They liked embroidery. They liked all kinds of things to look at me, look how awesome I look. And that was a very, very prevalent thing in the Viking Age. Because the more you could show what you wore, the more everybody respected you and looked at you as being wealthy and things like that. I have a very good book. I tend to show you old books whenever I give my answers. It's a book called Viking Clothing, and it has all kinds of pictures of grave finds in it and patterns for clothing and whatnot. Actually, what you can see here, there's some brooches and bracelets and things like that. There's some pretty cool stuff in that. There's a veritable smorgasbord of information online with Viking jewelry and things like that. Beware, there's a lot out there that is pseudo-Viking and isn't historically accurate. If you're looking for the historically accurate stuff, try to stick to museum pictures and reproductions of grave finds that are in museums. Another thing I want to touch on is belts. Men would wear leather belts, and typically they would have cast ends and cast buckles with them in various motifs, and would often, if they were out and about, would have a pouch made of leather that they would carry important things in. They didn't have pockets, like I said, so they had to carry everything on them. And typically they would have a knife or something like that either in the pouch or hanging from their belt. There's a lot more information that I could get into on this video. I didn't cover embroidery or coats styles, hat styles. There's also hairstyles that we're have relatively good information about based off of tapestries and runestones and artwork and things like that. Like I said, there's a lot more information. If you're interested, you can check it out online. There's many different resources to go to for more information on Viking clothing and jewelry. I hope that answered your question, and you have a wonderful day. Thank you.